I am thrilled to be here. I am a second generation homeschooler, and I have 4 kids. And let's see if their picture came up. There they are. 3 boys, 1 girl, 1 high school graduate, a senior this year, a sophomore, and a 7th grader. And we love homeschooling. I loved homeschooling so much that by the time I was 13 or 14, I had decided when I grew up one day and had kids, I would homeschool them. And then a few years later, when I met my husband, he wasn't my husband then, we were on our second date, and I said, by the way, when I grow up and have kids, I'm going to homeschool them. And if you're not okay with that, we probably shouldn't keep dating. Well, we just celebrated our 25th anniversary, and thank you. We've been homeschooling the whole time, and we wouldn't trade that decision for the world. And I'm so glad to be in a room full of people who are excited about educating their kids in a less traditional way, because I think it is one of the best decisions that you can make. In fact, I say that my parents' decision to homeschool me is one of the greatest gifts I've ever received. And I can imagine that someday you will have kids that will tell you the same thing. That's pretty powerful. So in addition to homeschooling my kiddos, I am also an author and a speaker. My first book, Adventuring Together, came out in 2020. It was a great year to write a book about adventure. Everyone was staying home, and here was my book that said, go out and adventure. So our family found all of our things, especially for that summer when my book came out, everything was canceled. All my kids' camps and classes, family trips. My husband and my 2 older boys had an epic backpacking trip planned with their Boy Scout troop. That was canceled. Everything was canceled, including all my book tour stuff, book signings. It was disappointing, to say the least. In fact, we really mourned some of the things that we were losing that summer. And so we decided, though, to do something different, and we decided to take a road trip from California to Minnesota to visit my brother and his family. So we loaded up our big van. You might have seen it in the parking lot. It's got a bunch of stickers on the back window, because on that trip I convinced my husband that putting stickers on our car was cool. He was anti-sticker before, but I made him a pro-sticker. And we stopped at national parks and all kinds of cool places. And I also did a non-sponsored impromptu book tour stops. I would just say, hey, we're coming into Billings, Montana. Meet me at this coffee shop, and I'll sign your book for you, because my publisher said they couldn't sponsor a book tour in 2020. So we just went rogue and did it ourselves. And I have to tell you that while that trip was not something we had planned, in fact, it was something that we were, it came out of loss. It actually turned out being something so incredibly wonderful. And you could ask all of us that initially there were tears and great sadness when we looked forward to the summer and what we were not going to get to do. And then you could ask us after our road trip how we felt about it. And we all would say, we are so glad that we got to do that journey, that we had that adventure. And the reason I share that story is because for some of us, that's how we jumped into alternative education and homeschooling, right? It wasn't ever the plan. We felt forced into it, or we had to do it. Maybe it wasn't what we envisioned. Maybe even right now, we're like, oh, we're going to be so different than our neighbors. We're going to be so different than the people at our church or our family. We're going to be so different from everybody else because homeschoolers are weird. Maybe a little, but that's okay. That's okay. I turned out just fine. Sharon was homeschooled. She did too. We're doing great, guys. Your kids are going to be great. Homeschooling might not have been your original plan, but I want you to know that sometimes just because it wasn't what you originally anticipated or it wasn't what you were planning to do, it doesn't mean that the outcome is going to be negative. In fact, I would say that the outcome can be fantastic. Fantastic. And so I want to spend the rest of our time together just talking about the ways that I have experienced homeschooling in alternative education to be an incredible journey for myself, for my family, and how I know it can be an incredible journey for your family. And how it creates just the perfect environment to create connections as a family, which I think is one of the most powerful and important parts of homeschooling, is we have the opportunity to spend time together as a family and cultivate connection in a world that really breeds a lot of disconnection. And so for me, that has been, from the start, the part of homeschooling that I loved the most, the opportunity to cultivate relationships. Even as a kid, I loved the flexibility of homeschooling. I loved being able to do my school in our tree fort or across the street in an empty field when the wildflowers bloomed in spring. You know, that like sweet 1 month that we have here in Southern California where the fields are green and there's poppies. I would take my blanket and go sit in there in the wildflowers and the green and do my schoolwork. I loved it. I loved the flexibility. I loved the freedom. I loved having time to babysit and read as many books as I can and get my first job at the library. I was a total dork and proud of it. I loved being homeschooled, but I loved more than the freedom and the flexibility. I loved the fact that I got to spend so much time with my mom and my dad and my brother and people that I babysat with, for people that are still my friends to this day. There was so much freedom and opportunity to cultivate relationships and connections. We are built for connections. That is what we need as humans, as families. We need connection. We need relationship. We need each other. And as parents, of course, we want to cultivate connection with our kids. And there are a lot of messages out there that say that is not the most important thing, or even that it's really not possible. They'll tell you that the older your kids get, the farther and farther apart your families will drift. I would say cultivating long-term, lasting relationship as a family is a counterculture idea. And I'm here for it. I'm here to be counterculture because we need that lasting connection with our families, right? I remember when my kids were little, I had a 6-year-old, 4-year-old, 2-year-old, and I was pregnant with our youngest, and I'd go to the grocery store. And especially this was true at Trader Joe's, because you know those narrow aisles where your kids fan out and you've blocked the whole aisle. So I'd be walking with them. Oh, I almost tripped on this, you guys. That would have been so classically me to fall on that. My kids would have been like, oh, I hope someone videoed that, Mom. We would have loved to watch you fall. I saved myself. Anyways, we'd walk through the store, and I'd say, single file, ducks in a row, because they would fan out inevitably and block the aisle of Trader Joe's. And someone would come up, and they would say, oh, wow, they're so cute. You have your hands full. And I would say, yes, I do. And then inevitably, like it seemed like every grocery store trip, someone would say, oh, they're so cute now, but just wait till they're older. Wait till they're teenagers. And then they would launch into this story of how awful their teenagers were and how awful my teenagers were going to be. And it was just so depressing and so discouraging. And after numerous times having this experience, I finally decided that I'd had enough. And I decided that wasn't going to be my story. It didn't have to be our story. I wanted to create something different with our family. And I knew, though, that it wasn't going to just happen magically or accidentally. It wasn't just going to suddenly appear that my kids and I would grow up and that we would all want to travel together and we would like each other. This was when we were on that 2020 road trip, and we were in Glacier National Park, straddling the Continental Divide, and we still like to be with each other. This was the vision I had for our future, that we would grow up and they would grow up. I would grow up too, because really I've been growing up right along with them. And we would enjoy one another's presence still. And I knew, like I said, that though this wouldn't happen it wouldn't be an accident. It was going to take intentional planning, thoughts, actions on the part of me and on my husband. And thankfully, I had really good examples. My parents, like I said, they homeschooled us, and they spent a lot of time cultivating connection with us. That didn't happen like on really fancy vacations and big trips. It was really just in the mundane, day-to-day stuff. We didn't have a lot of money for fancy vacations. A lot of times our big trips were coming to the beach right here. I grew up in Fallbrook. Does anybody know Fallbrook? Yes. I love it when people know my hometown. My husband and I both grew up there. Our parents still live there. It still feels like home to me. And so we would come here to the beach all summer long. And we would go on bike rides. And my mom read us tons of books. I still remember adventuring with my mom through books. So what I learned as a kid and then decided to create with my own family was that connection doesn't come from splash and flash, but it really comes from time and presence. And that's the first gift that you have the opportunity to offer to your kids as you homeschool them, is your time and your presence. Because really, our culture now is so fractured. There's so many things that pull us apart and want all of our time, right? There's a lot of it is good. There's causes to be a part of, which is phenomenal. We can help people, podcasts to listen to, sports and classes and activities for our kids to be involved in. As they become teenagers, they get jobs and they have relationships, and suddenly, like, it's busier and busier. But if we allow all of our time to be taken and pull us apart from one another, then we have less time to cultivate connection and relationship. And so I have loved the opportunity to spend my school days with my kids. Sometimes I will admit, when it's back to school time and everybody that is posting online, oh, my kids are back at school, I finally have a morning to myself, a whole day to myself. I'm like, wow, I wonder what that's like. I don't know. But really, I'm glad that I get to spend the days with my kids because they go fast. My oldest is 19 now, and the cliche is true, like, it's gone really fast. We need to embrace the opportunity to spend time and invest our time with the most precious people in our lives, and that's our kids. And so one of the ways that we have done that as a family is through adventuring together. And sometimes it's been epic adventures like a trip to Glacier National Park. But again, just like my parents, most of it has occurred in the mundane, everyday, day-to-day things, making breakfast together, eating lunch together, reading books after books after books together. It's just being together, cultivating and enjoying that time. And even our adventures, for the most part, are pretty normal. There's a lot of hiking. There's a lot of visiting tide pools. There's a lot of just going for walks together. They're not always grand adventures, but adventuring is a powerful tool for connection. And as a homeschooler, you have an incredible opportunity to work that into your school day or into your life. And we're going to just talk a little bit more about why I believe adventure is a powerful connecting tool, so that you guys can be inspired and figure out how you want to fit this into your family's culture, into your school days, and make it a part of your family thriving. I think one of the biggest reasons that adventure is a powerful connecting tool is because it allows you to have fun together as a family. And I love having fun. I know you can't be the fun parent all the time, but here's the reality. You need to be the fun parent sometimes. And for some of us, that comes more easily than others. But I love this quote by one of my favorite authors. His name is Roald Dahl. He wrote James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He also wrote another book called Danny the Champion of the World. It's one of my favorite books that he wrote, and it's the story of a really powerfully connected dad and son. And I loved the book as a kid. I love it even more as a mom. And at the end of the book, Roald Dahl wrote this little note, and I'm going to read you what it says. He wrote it to kids who are reading the book, and he's kind of instructing them for what their life could look like when they grow up and have kids of their own. Listen to what he says. When you grow up and have children of your own, do please remember something important. A stodgy parent is not fun at all. What a child wants and deserves is a parent who is sparky. I love that, a parent who is sparky. Number one, it sounds so British. He said stodgy and sparky in the same in the same little paragraph. But that's what our kids need. They need us to be sparky, to be fun, to enjoy them. And that's really why I love adventuring with my kids, is because we get the opportunity to really be with them and enjoy their presence. Climbing trees with them, scurrying up a rock, walking down the trail, holding hands. Just exploring and learning with them. And sometimes as parents, we forget to be the person who enjoys our kids, and we just see them as a project, right? Because there's so much we need to teach our kids, and so much that they need to learn from us. Like, they need to learn multiplication tables, so when that stranger in the grocery store finds out they're homeschooled and it's like, oh, you're homeschooled, do you know what 4 times 3 is? And your kid's like, no, because they're terrified. So they need to learn their multiplication tables. They need to learn the water cycle. They need to learn how to write an essay. All these things that we're supposed to teach them because we're home educating. But also there's like everyday life stuff that they need to learn, like, how to cut their own fingernails at some point, right? How not to wipe their boogers on the wall next to their bed. And you have one kid that does that. You do. You might not know, actually, but go home and look. You'll find them somewhere in their room. They need to learn how to look people in the eye when they talk to them. You have to teach them how to drive at some point, how to find a wonderful spouse. Like, there's so much that we're required to teach our kids to raise them up into, functioning and contributing members of society. And so sometimes that clouds our vision, and we forget to just have fun with them and to actually enjoy them. And for me, as a young mom with a 6'4", and a newborn, sometimes I got lost in just all the things that I felt like I had to do and I needed to do, and I forgot to enjoy my kids, to stop, look them in the eye, and be like, wow, I love being with you. I love you. I want to be with you. Our kids need us to be that person. And so connecting through adventure provides a perfect place for that, because we're away from our to-do list, we're away from our routine, we're away from all the things at home that sometimes weigh on us, and we just get to focus on being with them and cultivating that connection. So adventure provides a place for fun, and fun is a wonderful way to cultivate that connection with our kids. And I have to say, though, the opposite of that is adventure also is sometimes uncomfortable. And as much as we don't want to admit it, discomfort is a fabulous place to grow and to cultivate connection. I love comfort, actually. In 2020, we got air conditioning for the first time because my husband was working from home for the first time ever. And in the middle of summer, he said, "It is miserable in this house." And I was like, "Yes, it is. You're right. It's horrible." And he just didn't realize, because he wasn't there, all day long, every day in the sweltering heat. But he was like, "Yeah, we should I think it's time to invest in air conditioning." And I was like, "Lord, if it took 2020 to get us air conditioning, I say amen." So, yeah, I like being comfortable. I really do. But I'm not giving up air conditioning, but I will pursue discomfort in other ways with my kids because it is a fabulous way for them to grow. But it's also a fabulous way for us to grow together because if we, instead of just pushing our kids into discomfort on their own, but we walk into it with them, then we recognize that that pushes us together. It cultivates an incredible connection. And one of the ways that I have seen this happen again and again with my family is when we're hiking. It's a really simple thing, but I mean, we don't live on a farm. My kids don't have to get up at 2 a.m. and milk cows or feed the chickens. My son, my youngest, and I are reading a book right now, and in the book, the boy, it's a true story. He had to wake up every morning at 2:30 a.m. and milk cows for 2 hours before he went to school. My kids don't live that kind of life. They're not experiencing that kind of discomfort. So how can I provide them places and ways for them to grow? Well, we hike a lot, and sometimes hiking can be uncomfortable, especially when it's hot and we're hiking up big hills. I admit I don't love those parts. I would rather skip them, but I know that that's a fabulous place for us to grow. It's hard, though, when I want to focus on my own discomfort, and instead I have to deal with a kid of mine who's like, I hate this, why are we doing it? Why do we always go hiking? And they're complaining and they're grumbling, and I want to say, like, I can specifically remember my youngest, Davy, there in the plaid. He hates hiking the most. The other kids have all grown a lot, but David still struggles. And this was like, I don't know, he was probably 8. And I remember saying to him, you know what, I'm uncomfortable too. And I know it's hot. And I wanted to say, like, be a man. And he's like 8. But thankfully, I remembered that gentleness is a much faster way to my kid's heart than harshness is. So I was able to utilize some self-control and say, I know it's hard, but I will stick with you. I will walk with you up this hill. I know it's hot. I'll hold your hand. I'll give you gum. I'll sing songs with you. I'll hold your backpack for 5 minutes. I'll help you get to the top of the hill. And it wasn't like when I said that he stood up straight and was like, Mom's on my side. I can do anything. It wasn't like that. He was still like this. I hate this hike. But we made it to the top. And it took a while. But when we got to the top, I bent down. I looked him in the eye. And I was like, Davey, you did it. I knew you could do it. I'm so proud of you. And he just looked at me for a minute and he said, well, the Lord gives the weary strength. And then he just walked away. I was like, wow, that was profound. Yes, he does. And he did. He gave you strength. But it really resonated for me because it reminded me of the lesson that I want my kids to learn when we are walking through discomfort together, is that they will see not just that they can do hard things, but that I am with them in the hard things, that I am doing it alongside them. And when we're hiking, like, that's not that big of a deal. Yeah, it's nice to have Mom there with you, but what about as they grow older and they encounter things in life that truly are harder? They're going to know, they're going to remember all the times that I was with them in the little things, and they'll know that I'm with them in the big things. So adventure provides opportunity for us to experience discomfort together, but to grow through it, to grow as individuals, and then to grow together as a family, to cultivate that relationship. And sometimes, while we're experiencing discomfort, those adventures can turn into straight-up misadventures. Things go wrong. And we know that that's the truth because we all have experienced it, right? The reality is every time you go on an adventure, there is a possibility that one small thing or one grand thing will go wrong, and it turns into a misadventure. And we don't want that to happen because we really like things to go just the way we had planned. I really wanted our summer of 2020 to go as we had planned it to, but instead something else happened. And in those moments, we have the opportunity to practice grace under pressure and to support one another in the struggle. And that is a powerful gift to give our kids, to show them that even when things don't go as we had planned, even when things go wrong, we can still show up for one another in a gracious and loving way. And in our family, we have a saying. We like to say, it'll make a great story later. And we started saying it kind of as a joke, like a coping mechanism when things were going wrong. But it actually has turned into really a family motto that has changed our hearts, because we've seen it be true over and over again, that we can't change our circumstances, but we can change the way we react to them. What a powerful gift to give our kids. We can't always change our circumstances, but we can change the way we react to them. And I have to admit, sometimes, again, this is hard for me because I love comfort. I want to just be in my air-conditioned house and not have to help pull a kid up the trail and be sweaty and uncomfortable. I want the misadventures not to happen and things to go just the way I planned. I'm not really a perfectionist in practically any area of my life, but when I plan adventures, I have grand visions and ideas in the way I think they should go. And when that doesn't happen, I can get frustrated. Sometimes it's just that I forgot to bring lunch. That's only happened a few times because I have 3 sons, and if there is no lunch, there is trouble. But in those cases, they've had to dig into their backpacks and find smushed and stale snacks that happen to be in the bottom of them because they don't always clean out their backpacks. Sometimes it has been we've run out of water and we still have like a mile left of the hike and it's hot. We learn from that. Always pack more water than you think you need. One time, and this is probably one of our family's most favorite stories to tell about Mom and her misadventures, is the one time that I got stuck on a trail and had a sudden attack of diarrhea. And it was the only time I did not pack potty supplies. And to this day, my kids get scared if they can't find their socks. And that is a true story. It makes a great story later. So sometimes misadventures happen, but it's okay because really they bond us together like nothing else. It gives us, like I said, an opportunity to practice grace under pressure and to really connect with one another. And one time I saw this happen with my 2 older boys it touched me because I realized that all the things that we'd been saying and practicing and acting out over the years, they had really gotten it. And this was just a couple years ago. They were going out on a weekend backpacking trip to Catalina. And they were going with their Boy Scout troop, and it was just going to be the 2 boys. Mom and Dad weren't going, and they were so pumped. They were pretty good backpackers at this point, and I think that maybe made them a little bit cocky, because a Boy Scout's supposed to be prepared, right? They're supposed to have all the things that they need. Well, they chose not to take a couple things on this backpacking trip, which seemed fine when they were leaving. But then a couple hours after I dropped them off at the port in Long Beach, where we live, a storm came up. And it was September, and here, September is like the worst month in the world because everybody else is doing fall, and they're like pumpkin spice lattes and flannels, and we're like, it's 100 degrees and we're dying. And so it was not supposed to be cool. There was not supposed to be a storm. There was not supposed to be rain. They even looked at the forecast, and nothing was on the forecast. So they felt really confident not packing their ponchos or any rain gear, even though a Boy Scout is supposed to be prepared. So, like I said, a couple hours after they left, this huge storm came out of nowhere, and it was pouring rain, and I just felt so bummed because spending a weekend with a wet tent and wet clothes and wet boots and wet everything is just not fun. It's not comfortable. And I felt like even though they're, older boys and they know how to take care of themselves, I'm their mom. I want to take care of them still. I always will. And so I felt disappointed that I hadn't said, guys, you need to take your ponchos. But what could I do? Nothing. They were gone for the weekend. So I prayed for them and just waited to hear the stories when they came home. Well, that Sunday they came back and somebody dropped them off, and they walked up to the house. Their boots were just caked in mud. They were filthy. And I walked outside and I was like, guys, how was it? Was it terrible? And they both got huge grins on their faces, and they said, Mom, it was awesome. I was like, what? It was? They're like, yes. And my second born, William, the kid with the long hair there and the black jacket, William at a museum, and the toddler does not want to be there and wigs out, and all of the docents are giving you hard looks because they're like, your toddler does not belong in this museum, and they're going to touch a painting, and why don't you leave, right? There's going to be misadventures also when you're doing a school. And things will be difficult, but you have the opportunity to show your kids that while you can't change your circumstances, you can change your hearts. They're listening to us, they're watching us. Some of the things that we do as a family when things are going not the way we had planned is we stop and pray. And if you're not a praying family, that can look like gathering together, holding hands, hugging, and saying, we can do this together. That's what we try to do as our first stop when things aren't going the way we planned. Another thing we do is we make sure we speak encouraging words. Words are life-giving if we use them with grace and love. That's hard to do when it's times of pressure, right? But wow, we have the power to build our kids up with encouraging words. And really heal them with our words. We also practice a lot of reframing and flexibility. That means like, hey, this isn't going the way we want, but what can we get out of it? Let's be flexible. This is not what we had planned, but how can we be flexible? I really want to raise kids that bend with the wind and don't break. And that starts when our kids are little, teaching them to be flexible. Sometimes that's really hard. You know, you have that one kid who really always wants the blue cup for breakfast, and you don't have the blue cup one day for some reason. That's a perfect opportunity to teach them to be flexible. And it's hard. It's hard for them and it's hard for you. But you begin in small ways, teaching them to be flexible because it's a gift to them as they grow up. Another thing that we've done as a family that's really a powerful way to get through those challenging times is to read about people who've experienced true adversity, much harder than forgetting your poncho on a backpacking trip. For example, we read a few years ago the book, The Hiding Place. Have any of you guys read the book, The Hiding Place? Okay, a few of you. The rest of you, write it down, and you need to read it. It is one of the most powerful books I've ever read. I've read it multiple times since I was a child, and all my kids have read it now multiple times. And it's a story of a woman named Corrie ten Boom who experienced the horrors of a Nazi concentration camp because her family decided to hide Jews from the Nazis when they invaded Holland. And as a result, they were arrested, and her entire family was put in prison. And it's a wonderful story of someone who overcomes true adversity. Reading stories like Corey's makes it hard to be grumpy when you're in a wet tent, when you realize, oh, somebody else that I have grown to know and love through their story has gone through a much more challenging time than I am right now. I have a list of some of our favorite books that are these kinds of stories. I'll have them on my back table. You can come check it out, write the titles down, or since it's 2023, take a picture, or you can email me and ask me and I'll send you the list. But reading stories of people's lives who experienced adversity is a powerful way to help your family grow. And I know you're probably wondering, like, okay, Greta, you've done all this talk about adventure, but really, what about homeschooling? Because that's why we're here. And I know it feels like I haven't really talked about homeschooling. I haven't given you like the best math curriculum, or I haven't given you like how to teach your kid to read and 100 easy lessons, because that was never my experience. So I can't speak on that. I had one kid who taught herself to read at 6, hallelujah. Another kid who didn't learn to read till he was 9, and then 2 other kids that are still struggling with reading. So those are not the kind of homeschool talks I give. What I want to remind you of is that homeschooling and alternative education, whatever that looks like for you, is not just doing school at home. It's a whole life. It's a whole life. It is living with your kids day to day, connecting and building relationship with them, because that's what's going to last so much longer than the math lesson or the reading lesson or the history lesson or how to write an essay. The connections you create with your kids. And as a homeschooler, you have an incredible opportunity. You have the gift of time and the gift of freedom to spend with your kids and make that happen for them. I'm going to close with one story that I think illustrates this so well. When my mom homeschooled my brother and I, the first year they pulled us out of school was because we were in a private Christian school that we loved. It was wonderful, but my dad's business was going through a really hard time, and private school and failing business doesn't match. They couldn't afford the tuition, and they didn't want to put us in the public school in our town for a variety of reasons, and so they learned about homeschooling and decided we would try it. And that first year was really hard. None of us actually really liked it very much. And then the next year, we did it again, and it got better. And then the next year, it got even better until we all loved it. And we said, this is the life for us. But one thing that I remember so significantly that has stood with me all these years is not the lessons that my mom taught us around the kitchen table. She did a great job, I'm sure. But though I can't recall, like, oh, this math lesson, wow, it really stuck with me. Also, I'm not really a math person, so that's probably why. But I remember more vividly and so vividly sitting with her in the mornings before we started our school day in bed, her bed. I would come in, she would be drinking tea, I would get a cup of tea, and we would sit side by side reading our books, or sometimes she'd be reading the newspaper and I would read the funnies. And we just spent those first minutes together every day, connecting, being together, cultivating relationship. So what you do with your time is up to you, but I cannot recommend enough making sure you spend as much of it as you can cultivating connection with your kids. And it might look like just starting off the day reading together. It might look like going on a hike together. It might look like camping. It might look like going on some other kind of adventure. But cultivate connection, cultivate relationship through spending time with one another, knowing your kids, enjoying them, because that's the thing that lasts. And that's what I think is the gift of homeschooling and alternative education. You guys have that in front of you in the year ahead. If you guys want, I have books in the back, but I don't have many. My last shipment for my publisher hasn't come in. So if you get one, you can, if you don't get one today, you can find them on Amazon and in bookstores. They're there, and I'd be grateful if you decided you want to read them. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me online, gretaeskridge.com, or on Instagram. So now it's time for a picture.